Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of these little guys right here. Both of these are examples of the ProTech Knives Runt number 5. But first off, before we go any further, I want to let you know that these guys were sent to me directly from ProTech. They reached out to me, said, hey Nick, we got something you're probably interested in. You want to check it out? As always, I'm very happy to. But nonetheless, I told him, as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They did still send it along. We have to assume, though, that these are the very best quality controlled ones of these guys ever. I'm doing my absolute best not to let that affect the nature or quality of my review. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. So first off, there were two different models here with two different blade shapes on them, but I'm just going to use the brass one here for comparison purposes. First off, here it is against your Spyderco Delica, and so what we see here is this is a relatively small knife right here. Here it is next to the Ontario Rat number 2, as well as the Spyderco PM2, which absolutely dwarfs this knife. And then one other point of size comparison that's very relevant here is actually against this guy right here. This knife is the ProTech Knives Sprint, which is yet another California legal ProTech knife. What we see here is the Runt is just a little bit more stout in the body, even though both of them are practically speaking the same size. And then perhaps the most relevant measurement, at least here in the state of California, is this one right here, showing that this guy comes in under 2 inches uncontroversially. There is no amount the cop could dislike you that will make this greater than 2 inches, and that is a beautiful thing for people dealing with a very, very dumb law. So there is that. Next thing, I have talked about the Runt before. In fact, I have a review where I concluded that of all of ProTech Knives California legal versions, that was kind of the runt of the litter, and I don't mean that in the scrappy and excellent way. This is a whole different version. They have made a bunch of revisions. They have made a bunch of changes. This is just strictly a better knife here. And what we have on the table are two different varieties of these guys. Both of these particular knives are actually limited runs from Blade Show. However, and more specifically, they're limited because they have these hand-ground blades done by Mike Irie, right? One in the aluminum bronze handle right here, and then one in a black aluminum version. But that said, these are going to go into full production. They will have full production versions of these, and I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a heads up when that happens, so, get this filmed up here. They're going to be a little bit different in the blade grind, and they won't have the mirrored blade, but at the same time, it's going to be the same overall shape idea, etc., and so I figure I'll still go there. And then price-wise, although the Blade Show versions were a little bit different here, with the hand-ground blade, for the production version, we're going to look at $135 for the plain aluminum uncoated, 150 for the textured aluminum. We can see here there's a little bit of texturation here going on. And then 270 for the bronze with the inlay pin, as you see here. And then you've got options in DLC coatings and Damascus and such going up from there. But nonetheless, that's what we're going to look at in the final production versions, which should be launching around the same time that this video goes live. So let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of the ProTech Knives Runt number 5. Start with, on the good side, these are made here in the US of the A, right? ProTech is a company that's actually not that far from me. They're just up in the Orange County area, maybe LA. I don't know exactly where they fall, very relative to the line. Thing is, I've been to their factory. I've seen them making all the parts, and not of this particular knife, that was a little while ago, but they are made in the States by people in the States, and actually they are really nice damn people. Dave and all the other ProTech team, they're just amazing. They're kind and very supportive. I've never heard anything bad about them, and honestly, I appreciate that. I like supporting really kind makers, and all the more so when they're kind and local makers. So for a lot of people, that's going to be a plus, and it certainly is for me. Next thing, base price here. For the very base version, which is the black aluminum, no texturing, with the 20CV blade and American automatic, you know what? I am completely okay with that. I feel like that is an absolutely fine price. Very often, the fact that these are, and by the way, these are both automatic knives. You press this button, and they come flying open there. Very often there is a heavy tax, so to speak, not in terms of government, but in terms of market price on that, and I feel like this actually represents a reasonable way to get a pretty well-made American automatic. You know what? I'm okay with that. 135 base is fine. It's a reasonable price. Next thing, there are two different blade shapes here. One of them is called the Warncliffe, and one of them is the reverse Tonto, this being the Warncliffe, although I would argue it's maybe a little more sheep's footy, and this one is also a little Warncliffey, but it's a reverse Tonto because it's like a Tonto blade, but reversed. Wow, aren't you glad I cleared that up? Nonetheless, they're the same price, but it's nice that you got that option of two choices. In practice, I kind of prefer the reverse Tonto, aesthetically speaking, but both of them are fine for cutting. Right, there's no, frankly, even the eventual shape of the blade isn't all that different. It's just a question of what's happening on the front of it, right? Both have a swedge, etc. So that's very nice. Next thing, I appreciate that you have a choice of handle material as well. So according to ProTech, in their production run, they're going to have the black aluminum from ProTech. Really, chalky black aluminum? No. Love it or hate it, it's a thing. They're also going to have some blue aluminum, and then they've got this new material, which is an aluminum bronze. And I really like this material a lot. I'm not saying everybody needs to make everything out of it, but I think it works really well here because it makes the knife feel a little bit more hefty. And ProTechs always have a snap to them. And this in some ways makes that snap feel even, I don't know, it makes it feel, it's very strong, but it's, I don't know, I just like the feeling of that snap with a little bit of a heavier handle on there. It makes it feel a little less unwieldy, but also still authoritative. I am completely insane. Let's go on ahead and move on there. The next thing, these are automatic knives, and for a lot of people, that's not that important, but for some people, these actually can be very important, and more specifically, folks with some kinds of disabilities can actually be very, there is a strong accessibility bonus from an automatic knife. Somebody who might not have, for instance, the very fine motor skill to be able to get a thumb into here and then pull that out slowly and then reach in, might be much better suited to a knife where you just press a button with your thumb, and then to close the thing, you can just push it down against the table with your thumb on the button and it works out, right? So, and also, by the way, one-handed use is very easy and very possible here. There are some accessibility benefits to automatics. It's not just snickety-snick, oh, well, that's cool, right? So it's nice that those are options out there for people, as well as, frankly, for people who just have one hand and don't want to mess around with other kinds of things. So it's an option there. Next thing, these guys do have some nice details to them. I mean, to start with, actually, I really like this area of jimping on the backside here. This texturing is just there, for instance, as you're gripping onto the thing, your thumb isn't going anywhere. This provides very excellent texturing, while at the same time not being too harsh and being a little bit visually intriguing, if you will. I like that very much. I also like the fact that on this textured model here, they have actually stopped the texture underneath the clip. You see a little patch there where there is no texturing, and that is, well, frankly, necessary, but it is very, very well done. When you have texturing under a clip, it ends up eating your pants, basically, and that's never a great thing. Another thing that ProTech always does really well are clips. These have very nice deep carry clips. In both cases, they're very well done. They're relatively, nondescript, right? So you could look at this and think, oh, keys, a pen, or something like that, right? But more importantly, if we look at it, we see that the clip, the bottom part of the clip, is actually countersunk into the surrounding blade, and the screws themselves are flat on the top. So therefore, your pocket can go all the way to the very top of this clip without having any other kind of obstruction inside that path. Right? ProTech this is one of the things that they always do really well, and I love seeing it here as well. And then finally, the pins on these guys, the buttons, in this case is done with a mother of pearl style inlay here, and then in this case it's done with a little mosaic pin, which is actually a bunch of small pieces of metal that are kind of put together in there, and then filled with, I believe, some kind of a resin or another, but that's inlaid into the pin itself, and that actually is a really nice little effect. It's a tiny detail, but it does add something very real to the knife, and I appreciate that. And that'll be available in the production versions as well. Next thing, blades on these guys. Now, as I've mentioned, the blades will differ a little bit in production, in that these are hand ground versus the production will be machine ground, right? And so I can't vouch for the grind on the final version of the Runt here, but what I have seen are the grinds on, for instance, the Sprints and things like that, in more recent versions, and you know what? They've really been improving. They've been thinning out those edges, and especially on these tiny little knives, that's really helpful. But either way, they're going to be very, very nice blades, I imagine, based on everything else I've seen from ProTech. And, these versions here are actually in 154 cm, which is sort of middle-of-the-road steel, and the production ones are going to be in 20 CV, so that's going to be a pretty substantial upgrade in terms of chemistry, and ProTech usually heat treats their things right, and hopefully we're going to have those nice thin edges. But either way, the blades will be slightly improved from this in terms of metallurgy, and hopefully the grinds are going to be roughly equivalent, although, who knows? I mean, in terms of thinness and whatnot, they will not be hand ground in the production version. So there's that. Next thing, action on these guys. Look, ProTech seems to pride themselves on having very, very strong action, right? Meaning when you press this button, it comes flying out of there. There's really not a lot that's going to stop it from coming out of there. And that's a beautiful thing, right? And it's very, very satisfying. And it's also, by the way, very easy to two-hand open. If you're in the lunchroom with Irma and you know she'd be terrified of a switchblade, all you do is you put your fingers here, you disengage, and boom. It's just like Grandpa's slip joint, right? Nice and easy. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's one of the advantages of a side-opening automatic is it's very easy to stealth it open and have it not be an automatic if you need it not to be an automatic at that moment, so to speak, right? Next thing, I gotta say, one advantage of the Runt line over, for instance, the Sprint. I love the Sprint. I'm a big fan of this model, and particularly this knife here. But one of the advantages is that this just has a lot more to the hand, right? I have smaller hands than most, so these knives are a little bit more in my comfort zone than for many. But this guy definitely does fill up the hand a little bit more. Complete with this little, the finger divot here and the thumb jimping, this really does feel like it locks into the hand very well. And it feels, I'm only a 3-finger grip, maybe 2.5, depending how you want to count. But at the same time, it definitely feels like it fills the hand a little bit more than the Sprint. So if you want something that feels a little bit more beefy in the hand, then the Runt is definitely going to be something to consider over the Sprint, which is usually my choice for a small Cali Legal Auto. So there's that. Next thing, one thing I got to appreciate is the fact that there has been such a massive improvement generationally here, because the Runt last version had a number of major issues to it. It had a tip-down clip, which is not necessarily always a bad thing, but the way it interfaced with the position and things like that, very thick grind. They've fixed they've gone to tip-up carry, they've gone with a thin grind, better ergos. They removed the safety, which is actually quite needless, by the way. I mean, originally it did have a safety, and then, it can be fine, but the way that the buttons are recessed, there's really no way. I can press this against this table as hard as I'd like. There's just no way that this is going to open. And especially if you've got it in your pocket, such that, the fabric of the pocket is up against it. Even if you do hit the button full on, it's really just not going anywhere, right? So, nonetheless, we have just a bunch of improvements here. And by the way, one of the nice thing is there's a lot less writing on it. Now ProTech is right on the spine of the thing. It's just a little bit more minimal. So I feel like they've really made a massive increase. The Runt last model was not a knife I enjoyed at all. This knife is really good. And so I love seeing this kind of iteration. And this is sort of proof of the knife making truth in my estimation, that iteration just improves, generally speaking. So I love seeing that. And then finally, on the good side, I appreciate that these are being made to help us deal with dumb laws. As I said, I'm here in California, and it's a beautiful state. Lots to love about it, but at the same time, they have the stupid idea that a knife that is automatic is terribly dangerous. Oh my God, unless the blade is less than 2 inches. Because Yeah, this is lawmaking that is based on fear rather than reality, but at the same time, it is the law of the land, and for the moment, we got to respect that, right? And so I appreciate that ProTech, a California company, is making options that are very, very nice for folks who are living in California, as well as folks who are dealing with similar laws elsewhere in the world, or just want something a little bit on the smaller side, right? I mean, it's not just for Californians. This is a knife that is very nice to carry anywhere you go, but nonetheless, so I appreciate that that's that, and let's go ahead, and that all is the good. So it deals well with dumb laws, with a lot of strong improvements from the last version. It fills the hand a little bit more than the Sprint and some of the other options. It's got a great action, great blade, nice details. The autos do have some benefits for accessibility. Some nice handle material choices and blade shape choices with a fine price, and it's made in the States by good people. On the great side, this is really carryable. What I mean by that is, I have had this knife for a while, and in fact, I've dragged my feet on reviewing it just because I enjoy carrying it a lot, because it is very, very small, right? I mean, if I put this guy on the table next to the Spyderco Delica, what we see here is this fits well within its silhouette, and it just rides at the very top of the pocket unobtrusively, right? With a nice deep carry, this guy just kind of sits in there, and nothing's going to touch the blade. It's completely safe in here, and it carries really, really well, and especially if you go with a lighter weight aluminum, this guy disappears in the pocket, so to speak. And it is really, really nice. And it even carries, at least for me, it carries in like the coin pocket or the fifth pocket pretty readily, I think. So it's just a really, really nice choice in that way. I appreciate it very much. It was just it was a joy to have in the pocket anyways. And so if you're looking for a relatively small knife, or just something that is that carries very, very small, but still packs some punch, I think this is going to be a really nice choice for you, even outside of the California. On the bad side, to start with, autos always do have legal questions, right? You want to be careful there, and you need to know your local laws. Do not trust a jackass from the YouTube telling you about local laws, and don't take anything I've given you here as legal advice, but nonetheless, be very, very careful, because there are often laws in terms of automatic carry. In one state, a municipality, it's fine, and then the next one, it's felonies. There were weird things with shipping them, and, it's a pain in the neck. So anytime you go automatic, that little bit of extra springitude can cause some difficulties for you. Do keep that in mind, and do be very careful about that. Make sure you're not violating a law you don't know you're violating. Next thing, this is a small knife, right? 2 inches is perfectly capable for a lot of daily tasks, but there are definitely going to be times where you're going to want a little bit more in the way of length, right? There's a reason that most blades are around 3 inches. That seems to be a pretty good thing. So there are definitely times where if you like cutting the birthday cake, yeah, that's probably not going to be enough for you. So do keep that in mind. This is very, very small. Next thing, I kind of wish that ProTech would do more of these thin hand grinds, right? Because ProTech has this tradition of doing like ultimate customs and upgraded versions of their production knives. The Sprint is a knife that is available in the black aluminum and 154 cm, just like any other of their knives, but they also do these fancy versions, right? I would love to see hand ground options just more regularly out of them. I think it's a really neat concept, and it's a way to kind of unite the custom and the production in ways that they've already done before. I really hope this isn't the last we see of that, and we see it outside a more limited edition kind of world. Next thing, this is a nitpick, but at these kinds of prices, we start asking questions here, because remember, the bronze one here that we're looking at is $270. If we look at the very top here at the ProTech logo, we see that on this one, it's actually not perfectly centered. We see that it's a little closer on the bottom than the top. Actually, the aluminum one is a little bit better off here, with about the same spacing to either side, but that is definitely something they want to be very careful of as they are producing these guys. That is a concern. And by the way, if you're seeing some gunktion on this beautiful mirror polish blade, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, it's not going to be there on the production version, but it is beautifully mirror polished, just enough that you can not only see the jackass behind the camera, but also the I Am Nick Shabazz t-shirt available from nickshabazz.com/merch. Anyways, I digress. If you're seeing gunk on there, that's tape mascus, right? This guy has been in my pocket and used a fair amount. And the blade is not scratched. It just, because it's mirror polished, it definitely shows lint and dust and things like that. So do keep that in mind. So there is that. Next thing on the bad side, and actually last thing on the bad side, the bronze aluminum is a little bit of it's a finicky material. What I mean by that is there are a couple of little downsides. I mean, the biggest one of which is that it's a little bit on the heavier side, right? If I put this guy in my little scale here, we see is this guy comes in at, 106 grams, but for those of us who are more used to, let's see here, 3.76 ounces for under 2 inches of blade, versus the aluminum is coming in around 2 ounces overall. So you're definitely paying a price in terms of weight. It's still a pretty lightweight knife, but it definitely carries a little bit heavier. It also does have a little bit of a smell, both on your hands after you use the knife and on the knife itself. It's not terrible. It's just kind of a little bit of that penny smell, right? But it is a thing that you're not going to get with aluminum and titanium or something else like that. It's also a little bit on the pricey side, and it does patina. What I mean by that is I've got a little polishing cloth here, and I'll just on the very tip of this guy kind of clean it up a little bit, just so you can see that. And actually, you can kind of see it inside the lanyard hole as well. There is a very different shade that this guy turns when it is not patinaed. And you can always polish it back up again, right? And it'll patina right back. I mean, it can be very, very golden at first. Right now, you're seeing it in a very patinaed state, but it can be more polished, but it won't stay that way. So do keep that in mind. It's not the end of the world. And actually, I ended up liking this brass version a good deal more. Partly because of aesthetics and partly because I just like the heft of the material of this size, but it is a material that does have some drawbacks. And so to me, all of that is the bad, is that the bronze aluminum is a little bit heavy with a couple little drawbacks there. The logo wasn't perfectly centered. I'd like to see thin hand grinds as an option more often. This guy is very, very small, and autos do have some strong legal questions that you might have to contend with. On the ugly front, there's really nothing ugly here, and so let's go to the final conclusion, which is that these are really nice little knives. These are surprisingly so. The Runt, like I said last time, that was not a knife I enjoyed, and this is proof that with some work you can turn anything around, right? This is really good. These are very nice because they're made in the States with nice people. done at a pretty decent base price. You got choices in blade and handle, good for accessibility, good jimping, careful texturing, good blade, good action. It fills the hand a little bit more than some of the other Cali legal options. It is massively improved from the last version. It's a great option for dealing with dumb laws, and it is just carrying this is a freaking pleasure. I'm a big fan of that. Of course, autos are legally encumbered. The blade is small. I wish the hand grinds were a little bit more commonly done, and the logo centering's a little off, and the bronze aluminum has some pros and some cons, but, honestly, this is really good. I will note, though, that this does have an unusual proviso for my channel of being different from production. My option was basically to wait around a while before I do a review, get one of the production ones, or to do this review based on these guys and then do something once the production finally. I elected to just kind of go for it here. But I'm assuming that the grind is going to be as thin and as nice as it is on the sprints, which they've been doing very well. And if it's anything like this is very good. But do keep that in mind. Do take a look at that. And, yeah, that's going to be a factor, but nonetheless, based on what I'm seeing here, the profound ease of carry, the meeting a legal niche, and the practicality and the ergos just make this great. And it made it an absolute joy in the pocket. This was a knife that I have very much enjoyed carrying and will continue to enjoy carrying on occasion because it carries so well. It's just so nice and compact. It's kind of hard to, I don't even know exactly that I'm describing well why I like this thing so damn much, but it's really a good object, and it's such a good practical little tool. And so given that it is an absolute joy in the pocket and I've been enjoying carrying it this much, I can't help but call it a gem, right? It is such an easy carry that I just found myself, I'll grab the Runt, no problem, right? It's so easy to throw in any set of pants you got, no freaking problem there. And actually for me, the bronze one was the one that kept winning out, partly because I prefer this blade shape, but like I said, I think that added weight really does make this feel like a substantial little tiny knife in a way that you very often don't get. Things like the Spyderco Dragonfly, which I do love, by the way. Actually, let me pull that guy out of the case here, just for comparison's sake. Because it is sort of in a similar position in terms of overall blade length. This feels very light, very borderline toy-like. It's a great knife. I'm not diminishing it, whereas this feels very beefy. It feels like a big tool, right? So for me, the bronze actually kind of won out here. It's a little bit different as well, I think, is the other thing. I'm not a big fan of the black aluminum, and this is different. But if weight is your concern, I would go aluminum 100%. But either way, if you find yourself enjoying the look of this little guy, needing the size of this little guy, or wanting something with a big snap in a very small package, then I think this guy will bear the runt of filling that need. Anyways, hope this has been interesting to you, that I reviewed this like a pro tech, and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.